Well, with me today is Mark Buchanan. I'm excited about this interview. Mark is a pastor. He is a best-selling author of books such as Your God is Too Safe, The God Walk, and Sacred Rhythms, amongst others. He also writes for Christianity Today and the Leadership Journal. He is also the Associate Professor of Pastoral Theology at Ambrose Seminary here in Calgary. Mark, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today.
Kyle, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No, not at all. I'm always impressed when people respond to my emails. We first connected when I sent you an email just saying, "Hey, can we talk about Sabbath?" And you graciously accepted or invited me for coffee, and I did very well on that paper. That was really good. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, great. Yeah,
wonderful. And so, as I explained to you, I really feel that in this midst of this pandemic time, that it's important to articulate how our faith sits in this place of almost struggle, right? Things aren't easy right now, necessarily for a lot of people. And I know on the Ambrose website, it says that you offer courses in the practice of renewal,
right,
which kind of suggests that renewal is a constant thing for Christians.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Oh, I think so, Kyle. I mean, the motto of the Reformed Church, whether it's also the practice of the Reformed Church, we could debate, but the motto is the Reformed Church always
reforming, yeah.
And I think that we could take that idea, apply it individually, personally, and say that the renewed Christian always renewing, or even the renewed human always renewing. That Paul in 2 Corinthians talks about outwardly wasting away, but inwardly being renewed day by day. He talks about the renewal of the attitudes of the heart. So it's a biblical concept that our lives are, in a sense, this entropy, the spiritual, emotional, moral entropy in our life that's constantly in need of not some legalistic, bludgeoning or badgering, but just good nourishment. And so I really do think if we think about rest and renewal as significantly and seriously as we think about activity and productivity, I think that we would find a better kind of rhythm through our lives.
Sure. It's always struck me, I'm not necessarily a musician, but we put our son in piano and now he plays trumpet and band. And in music, the rest part is always really, really important. I was a kids magician for 3 years, and one of the things that magicians always know is that like the magic happens often in the place where you don't see anything going on. So it's that place of inactivity, that place of rest, which kind of sets the stage for the wow factor. And why sometimes we have that backwards in the Christian life, that we think it's always about doing.
Yeah.
About going forward.
Well, there's no, I love that you pull on the musical metaphor, Kyle, because I remember when I first was pastoring a church that I was at for many years, and they had what I call the wall of sound approach to worship. Like everybody, right, like it was like a horse race out of the gate, like everything's thundering, and there's no dynamic to it. It was just got really boring, and actually people started to close themselves. Like if you could watch them physically close themselves to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I'm a bit of a musician, but I understand the dynamic of music enough that I realized that one of the things I had to help that church with was exactly what you said, that part of the beauty and the mystery and the potency of music is not just in the notes we play, but the notes we don't play. What was a great clarinetist or saxophonist or whoever said that? It's the notes we don't play.
Yeah.
And there's a sense where the silence, the stillness, the pause is not just kind of necessary for our own renewal, but for the potency to sort of be released. I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And honestly, it's a biblical pattern. Like it just starts at the beginning, 6 and 1, 6 and 1. God himself, we presume doesn't need rest, but enjoyed it, engaged in it, set the example for it anyhow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and this sense that the whole creation, that's whoop and woof, it's just part of the structure, the very texture of creation is this: do something, don't do something, do something, don't do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. I've always tried, and I don't always practice it well, but I've always tried to remind myself of, the Jewish understanding of the day, which begins at sundown,
Yeah.
which was always kind of struck me that, okay, so what is the first thing that you do as part of the day? Is you rest, you go to sleep, you recognize that you are not in control.
Yeah.
Um,
Kyle, I began this very morning. I had written down that I was doing a devotional for a group of pastors, and then last night I thought I better take a closer look at that email, which I got way back in June or something, and it was an hour-long teaching on Sabbath.
oh wow.
I was, ironically scrambling early this morning to kind of pull together
Sure.
this kind of rest, but one of the things I said, I had a portion on the when of Sabbath, and I said, I'm not a strict Sabbatarian. I think that you can find a day that works, and here's some things you might want to think about doing or not doing. But I said the one thing I do find the great wisdom is a Jewish practice of the sundown to sundown.
Yeah.
For that very reason you're talking about, that we begin not by this sort of upward, moving
Yeah.
toward activity, but downward. It begins with community
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
nourishment and receiving, and then it moves into quietness, a deepening quietness to the point of then we sleep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why do we, like, if this is kind of our faith heritage, why do we today tend to associate, a sense of struggle with a lack of faith? Like, if renewal is a constant part of our Christian life, why do we often feel that the need for renewal speaks negatively against us?
Yeah, I don't know where that I mean, I think we could probably trace it somewhere into the psyche, that sort of collective psyche of, the Western, especially the American, and how that's been sort of shifted or translated into Canadian culture. But this kind of independent spirit, this kind of pioneer spirit, this frontier spirit, this bootstrapping spirit that is so really present and has now been corporatized, monetized, corporatized, everything else, weaponized, whatever eyes you want to put onto it. But I do think that that's so profoundly rooted in a collective psyche that even as we, disavow it, we somehow embrace it.
Sure.
And I mean, I do. I just think about, I'm for 20 years, I've been called upon in many circles, contexts, even non-Christian ones, to talk about Sabbath, or at least the idea of rest. And always the question comes up is, why do I feel guilty when I rest, or feel that somehow this is a failure on my part?
Sure.
This represents some reprehensible weakness in me, and if I was a better, stronger person, I would be able to muscle through this. My definition of Sabbath is where we're invited to imitate God, but part of the imitation is to realize we are not God.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think that in a sense, our pushing past our limits is always rooted in the primal sin is, I want to be as God, but not in the way Jesus would ask, to be as humble and gentle and kind and loving.
Sure.
I want to be the omnis. I want that omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. And so I want to imitate God in these powerful kind of, this posture of power. and it doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work for anybody, but I still am vulnerable or susceptible to the delusion of it. So I really do think this 6-in-1 rhythm of built into creation and then embedded in covenant. That's the interesting thing about Sabbath, is both creational mandate and a covenant commandment. So the way I understand it, Kyle, is that it's for the whole world. It's for, I mean, if you actually look at the Sabbath commandment, it's like, make sure everybody gets it. Make sure people who work for you and the slaves, donkeys get it. It actually mentions donkeys, for crying out loud, right? So make sure everything in creation benefits from this gift. But I think it's a creational mandate that the people of God are to excel at in a way that we become exemplars for the world, but also benefactors for the world. So the overflow of our own restfulness is a gift to the girl, the Vietnamese girl who works at Tim Hortons. And honestly, if we're harsh with the Vietnamese girl or the Filipino girl who works at Tim Hortons, if we're impatient, if we're gruff, if we something's, I'll just go prophetic here. Something's wrong in our own spirit.
Sure.
Something's broken, because the whole way to this it's not legal, and there's certain there's certain kind of overflow that should make that evident. And one of them is, I think that, if you look at the Sabbath commandment, the fourth commandment, there's this phrase that's glaring. I mean, it's I think one of the most salient phrases in it. Make sure that your servants, etc., have Sabbath as you do.
Yeah.
In other words, the benefit to the young woman who works at Tim Hortons, or the middle-aged woman who's probably a doctor in her home country but couldn't get credentialed.
Sure. Yeah.
If my Sabbathing or my renewal isn't a gift to her, then I don't think it's a gift to anybody.
Yeah, there's a certain justice that's demanded. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think, earlier you mentioned the word community, and partly I wonder, part of our age that we live in right now is so individualistic. And if we heap upon ourselves the sense of everything, I have to do everything, it's all about what I do or what I produce, then that sense of rest and allowing maybe others to bless us, or maybe God to work, the sense of releasing control becomes a very frightening thing in a world where it's all about me.
Oh, and this is probably why other disciplines like silence and solitude that are really crucial to this renewal are disciplines that are very difficult for most of us to practice in any sustained way, because the noise and the commotion, the noise and the busyness of our lives have become fundamentally ways of avoiding ourselves.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
If we can stay busy, if we can stay noisy, if we can never lie down, never rest. We know how to crash, we just don't know how to rest.
Sure. That's good. Yeah.
Or veg. We know how to veg, we know how to crash. We don't know how to genuinely kind of be in this mode of deep attentiveness, gratitude, and receptivity, which is really at the heart of rest. Then I think that these things, one of the benefits, but also the frightening things, is they bring us face to face with ourselves.
Sure.
The story of Jacob wrestling with the man who turns out to be God in Genesis 32. It actually begins, he sends all of his stuff over this other side of the river Jabbok, and it says, and so he was left alone, and a man came and wrestled with him. And it's that being left alone that opens up the possibility of an encounter. And as you're a good pastor and scholar, that passage of Jacob is, scholars wrestle with, is this also, yes, it's an encounter with the divine and the other and the mysterium tremens and all that, but is it also, in a sense, an encounter with himself, this sort of this wrestling going on, this sort of projection of his own psychopathology or whatever, right? However, we understand that text, there's a sense where he's coming to some reckoning,
Mhm.
but the precondition is this man who's surrounded himself with stuff and tried to always one up everybody, finally is kind of left by himself.
Yeah. Yeah, to
And
meet the
yeah,
God who confronts. Yeah.
the God who confronts, but sometimes he's got to kind of get us in a place of stillness or quietness or aloneness or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I do think that a lot of our commotion, our drivenness, probably underneath it for many of us is a fear of coming face to face with some stuff.
Mhm, mhm. So what, actually, it was interesting. I read a book called All God's Children and Blue Suede Shoes. It was Keith Myers. I forget.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's a book on popular culture. And so where he goes is that the rise of popular culture is rooted to kind of urbanization, people being disconnected from their community, from the small villages and moving into urban centers, and then feeling very alone because they are cut off from everything that they've known.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden having to ask existential questions: who am I? Where am I going? What is life about? And feeling so uncomfortable that what do? They create a system of distraction
Fascinating.
to keep them from entering into that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the system of distraction is it's at the heart of it is never being where you are.
Yeah.
So I'm having dinner with friends, but I'm under the table, on my device.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah. So we're probably not going to be confronted in a wrestling match, probably a divine wrestling match. So what are some signs in our own lives that we might be in need of renewal?
Oh, it's such a good question, Kyle. I would happily send you after this, and if if anybody's interested and wants to get this from you, you'd be free to distribute it. I've over the years collected symptoms of my own soul weariness.
Oh, okay.
And so far I have 32, and actually I probably have
Wow.
more, but I wanted to keep it to one page and a 12
Sure.
point font times new Times New Roman or whatever. And so that fits on one page, 32 point bullet points. And I go over that often and sort of self-diagnose, but the one thing that I always come back to is almost kind of the summation of all those 32 symptoms is I stopped caring about what I care about. There's actually a technical word for it, anhedonia, which is I've lost the love. I have no pleasure anymore. It's the end of Ecclesiastes where it talks about seek your creator in days of your youth before you find no pleasure and certain things. And but when I think about the things I love, the meals, the people, the looking, going to an art gallery, and I'm too exhausted to want that. That is a significant sign that my heart, my body needs some renewal.
Sure. So that would be fascinating. Yeah, I'd love to have that. I'd love to receive that, and I'm sure that there'd be others who would be really interested in that as well. I think one of the profound things about that is, and I think one of the blessings of a list like that, not that it's prescriptive and everybody will find them, that it has to kind of follow that route. But so often I think in our need for renewal or in our discouragements, we feel like we're alone, right? Everybody else has it together. And I'm just by myself where, having somebody like yourself say, actually, I've written down 32 signs for myself. It kind of, so this is actually something that's part of faith and part of life.
I think it very much is. I'm in a devotional, but I actually began the day. I teach at Ambrose University and Seminary, and we had a guest speaker, a brilliant woman by the name of Kate Bowler,
Okay.
and Canadian, but she teaches at Duke University. She's absolutely brilliant. And she was talking about the kind of Instagramization, I don't know if she used that, of our lives, so that if you look at my Instagram feed, maybe if I look at yours, I'm seeing you at your best. I'm
Yeah.
seeing you in the beautiful places. I'm seeing you with your smiling family. I'm seeing you kind of at the height, at the pinnacle of your maybe week. I get the one and the best, and it's photoshopped. I mean, you went in
Yeah.
and did a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
editing, make
Yeah.
yourself look cuter. And the sense that we're comparing our worst self, or at least just our sort of sad sack sitting on the sofa eating potato chip self, with the pictures of everyone else who look
Yeah.
slim and happy.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is a sort of sense of the culture itself, and some of the things that we're regularly consuming in the culture are falsifying and heightening that sense of I'm all alone, and falsifying the sense of the communal struggle,
Yeah. Yeah.
the human struggle.
Yeah.
And I mean, I felt guilty as charged, because I'm currently, my wife and I started a new ministry, and I still teach at Ambrose. I'm living on a little island
Mhm.
in British Columbia, and looking out, as I lift my gaze, I'm looking out at the ocean. And so there's a sense where, wow, how'd I get here?
Yeah.
And so I'll, routinely on my Instagram post pictures of this beautiful sunset or whatever, the water.
Yeah.
Well, that's about 5 minutes of my day.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the rest is I'm, working hard, or involved in some kind of drama that I need to kind of attend to and help with, et cetera. So I do think that that's a factor as well. I don't think we eliminate that. We just need to be aware of it, and maybe not, certainly not be sucker punched by it,
Sure.
but maybe also not participate in it quite at the level we are tempted to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes maybe Instagrams of us floundering, or the sort of sad sack of ourselves sitting on the couch eating potato chips or something.
Sure. Well, because the perfect and the pristine is nobody's story.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the courses that you also teach is a course on the life and times of David.
Right.
And again, maybe one of, not necessarily the Instagramization of life, but we look at David. David is the man after God's own heart. Slew Goliath. How did it was, so we look at all those positive things, those heroic things. How did David experience the need for renewal or spiritual discouragement or frustration?
Well, I mean, so many of the Psalms at least trace somehow their kind of origins to David, the of David Psalm. So
Yeah.
I tend to believe he wrote many of them, but certainly many inspired by something from the story of David. And how many of them are lament? How many of them
Yeah.
are to
Yeah.
God? How many of them are imprecatory? This is horrible, and here's my solution for it, God. You could kill all those people, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think Calvin called the Psalms what did he call them? It's sort of this idea that they reveal every part of the human soul, this human condition.
Yeah.
They're this sort of encyclopedia of human and struggle and emotion. And so I think we just go to the Psalms and we say, yes, we have these moments of heroism in David. How many do we have? We can count them, actually, but it's enough we can count. And that's the 70-year-old life. He lived 70.
Yeah.
Well, we can probably count as many kind of heroic, maybe not quite as spectacular and dramatic, but we could probably count the heroic moments in our lives if we live to be 70 or so. We also can count the tragic and these debacles in his life. But what we know for sure, again, and both the story and the Psalms bear witness, is many years of profound struggle, reaching out to God, crying out to God, agonies within and without, betrayal by people he trusted,
Family members,
um,
yeah. Yeah.
family members, all of that. So I think in some ways, come back to this Instagramization, that sometimes the way we've taken a story like David's and sort of portrayed it, maybe in the pulpit, but certainly in sort of popular understanding, is a bit of an Instagram. Let's show David's,
Sure.
holding up Goliath's head or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Let's show David dancing before the ark. And so there's this bowdlerization, this sort of let's falsify or let's kind of gloss over those nasty bits, or even just the human bits. Just these kind of
Sure.
like, my heart aches. Where
Yeah.
are you, God?
Yeah.
But there's a couple of phrases in the Davis story, where he's on the first out in the caves trying to hide from Saul, and Jonathan finds him. It says Jonathan helped him find strength in God.
Mm.
And then a little later on,
Yeah.
actually after we find out that Saul and Jonathan have both been killed on Mount Gilboa, David says a terrible day. Everybody blames him for what happened and blames him for the Ziklag getting burned. And it says, and David found strength in God. So now he's all alone and has to do whatever he's learned in his friendship with Jonathan to go and find strength in God. We don't know what he does. We could
Sure.
speculate on some other sources, but here's a man who I think we can find some very, very clear evidence that was constantly seeking that renewal,
Yeah.
because there was this erosion or deterioration of his passion, of his joy, of his hope.
Mhm, mhm. And you see the constancy of God in the midst of it,
Yeah,
right? That our feeling, and this is where, the story of Israel and the lament, like our feeling of absence, our feeling of being left by ourselves, in some sense is not true, because God is always there, right? We
right.
are always borne up by the community, but also by the Spirit of God, which can be hard when we're in that time of discouragement or the need of renewal.
Absolutely. And that's like coming back to this community idea of
Yeah.
community. Sometimes we have to sort of have faith for the other. We've all experienced that my faith is so depleted that I need the people around me whose faith is robust, to
Yeah.
not judge me, but to have faith for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've experienced it. I've experienced the other, where I've had a waning or an ebbing faith, and I felt simply just kind of accused or judged or misunderstood by those around me. But I've experienced enough the beauty of people who, it doesn't matter that right now I don't really believe in God or trust God. They'll do it in my behalf,
Absolutely.
and not in some
Absolutely.
controlling or imposing way. They will just kind of stand in stand in that place for me. And
Yeah.
when the men bring the paralyzed man on the mat to Jesus, break the roof open, it says that Jesus, seen their
Their
faith,
faith. Yeah.
said to the
Yeah.
man.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And it's a beautiful thing to be held up by that community, and to know that it's actually okay to feel your feels, right? To put it that way. Like it's
Yeah.
that you're not actually I had never noticed that passage of Jonathan encouraging David,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's
First
just,
Samuel 23. I can't remember the exact verse.
yeah,
But
no, that's just wonderful. Like it's okay to be in that place.
yeah,
And God understands.
totally.
And the community, when community acts rightly, understands and will believe for you, will pray for you until you have that, until you're in the place where you can pray along with the community again.
Entirely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's how healthy community functions. And I mean, I'm not talking even extraordinary. I think just, I think it's happening in a lot of our churches. And, I when I was a pastor, I loved to point it out, not in some way that would embarrass people, but just say, this is happening.
Yeah.
That we know how to gather around. We've demonstrated we have an instinct and a readiness to gather around the hurting, the lonely, the heartbroken, and we're not demanding from them a testimony of faith. They don't have it, so we have it for you, and
Sure.
I'll be in
Yeah.
that place. So at some point.
Absolutely. So, so if you knew that somebody, like, so, you know, this will eventually get posted and people will see it. And if you knew that somebody right now will be watching this, and is in that need of renewal, is feeling like, you know, I'm done or whatever, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I first want to say that God is faithful. God is present. God has not forgotten, even though it may feel that way. And you know, that passage in Isaiah, those who wait upon the
Yeah.
Lord will renew their strength. They'll rise up on wings of eagles. They'll walk and not faint. They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not faint. And that's a biblical promise. But the interesting thing about that passage, Isaiah 40, is the way Hebrew poetry usually works is you move from the lesser to the greater.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, ascending order, cascade, or, you know, it's kind of crescendoing. And that starts with what we think should be the crescendo, flying on wings of eagles, and ends with what we think should be the lesser, walking and not fainting.
Hmm.
And scholars have pointed out, particularly Walter Brueggemann, I believe, that actually it's probably the crescendo, the kind of high moment is to walk and not faint. That we've all experienced those ecstatic moments. We
Sure.
win the lottery, you know,
Yeah.
it's a boy, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
or we fly on wings of eagles. They're momentary. They come a few in a lifetime. We've also had times where we just had so much energy working at us and so much kind of adrenaline almost that we can run and not grow weary.
Yeah.
It's the walking and not fainting, which is really a lifetime
Yeah.
project. That is the I think that where we experience the real power and presence of God. And so I do think it crescendos with walk and not faint. But it's waiting on the Lord. And Kyle, I've tried to understand what that means, because I don't think it's just kind of lounging about.
No.
And so there's lots of hints, and I won't, you know, this isn't sort of a Bible study, but like that psalm, you know, I will wait for the Lord, like the watchmen wait for the morning. And it's a weird kind of image. Is this psalm? Anyhow, I can't remember which one it is, but the sense that I know when morning's coming, for crying out loud. Like you know, I can just look
Sure.
at my watch, right? You know,
Yeah.
I can ask Siri or whatever, or Alexa, and she'll tell me what the sun, right? So it's like a predictable thing. And yet the sense is that I'm watching for it, not because I'm going to get surprised by it, but there's such a need for it.
Mm.
And this waiting and watching. And I think that I would say to the person who's so in need of renewal, God is faithful, but if you could just watch for it.
Sure. Yeah.
And that might be the smallest thing. I think, you know, when you're watching for the morning, you just notice. I remember a few times in my life where, for various reasons, I was waiting or watching for the morning.
Yeah.
And that moment where you just think, oh my goodness, I can suddenly see just the barest outline
Yeah.
of a silhouette on this of the trees on the skyline or whatever.
Yeah.
And so in anticipation, I sort of felt hope. So I would just say, I don't just if nothing, it's not even a sort of go do this, but there's something about that God is faithful, but if there's one thing that you might open yourself to, that is watch for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, so I grew up in BC and would go to a camp on Fetus Island all the time.
Okay.
And as you were talking about the sunrise, I remember I was on staff and during the camp and went down with a friend of mine. We thought, you know, we're going to watch for the sunrise. And so we went down to the water's edge and sat on the dock and had a great chat and watching for the sunrise. and just watched and watched and watched and watched and watched, and it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And finally, we realized we were watching the sunrise from the wrong direction. And so, but I've often used that, about kind of our life of faith, because then we look for the crescendo moments, right? The sun cracking the mountains and all that stuff. When sometimes watching for the morning is this gradual brightening that takes place over a certain length of time, which doesn't diminish God's work, doesn't diminish what is happening. But so when you were talking about just wait for it, kind of the sense of, the brightening is happening maybe in small ways, and it might be stretched out, but God is faithful. The promise is there, and is actually being revealed, even if we don't recognize it right now.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the second thing I say, that maybe you've even run out of the capacity to watch and to wait, but there's somebody who will do it for you. There's somebody who will carry you, will have faith for you, and that's okay. That's okay. It's fine with God. Somebody has faith for you.
Yeah, perfect. Mark, thank you very much. I know that your words are going to be a blessing to others. If people want to connect with you, know more about you, they can go to markbuchanan.net, which is your website, and they can learn about your books and your ministry and contact you there. Mark, again, thank you very much for your time. And I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless.